Wide-angle lenses, wide-angle lenses, wide-angle lenses.
We've all got one.
We've all got one, but do we really know how to use it? In this video, I want to talk about 5 creative ways to use your wide-angle lens. But before we do that, I just want to explain what the light does when it hits this lens. So you've got this massive curve, and when the light comes in from that angle, it hits the lens and then corrects down to go straight onto the sensor. Everything in front is only coming in at a slight angle. What's out the side, you're trying to compress all of this scene onto such a small point. And what happens is you get some really heavy distortion. And it's that distortion that we can use to our advantage in a creative way. First tip is to lean into warping your image. And the best way to do that is to get right up close to the subject. But if you really want to enhance that distortion, you need to get down low. And I mean really low. As I mentioned before, you've got the sharp curve of the lens which pulls in the light from all those different angles. The lens does its very best to make all the straight lines look straight, but it still can't really achieve that. The most obvious effect of that distortion is that vertical lines tend to lean in as you head towards the edge of the frame. Most modern cameras and lenses do their best to fix that. Don't try to fix it, lean into it. In fact, in your camera settings, you should be able to turn off distortion adjustment. Turn it off and see what happens. Wide angles work amazingly for diminished perspective as well. In the real world, objects up close appear bigger than those in the background. But with a wide angle, that's even more pronounced. So with just 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, I'm so much further away and appear so much smaller in the frame. This can work really well when you want one object to appear the same size as another one without having to resort to doing anything in post. What's so good about the wide angle though is that your hyperfocal distance is much closer to the lens. Without having to do any focus stacking, you're actually able to get a foreground object in focus as well as the background object. There are various tools to find that hyperfocal distance. I use photo pills, but you can find almost 100 different apps out there that will do the same thing. Landscape photographers particularly like to use this by putting an object in the foreground to make the scene much more interesting, and sometimes use it for leading lines up to the main subject. The danger is making your main subject too small. Your subject is amazing, but what use is taking a photo of a tree if you can't see the forest around it? With a wide-angle lens, you're able to get the entire scene in while still keeping the main subject as a prominent figure. And I can get the cars going by around us. Of course, this also means I have to be really careful of my own shadow. Now, of course, you don't necessarily need to use this just with landscape and urban photography. It's a really effective technique of portraiture, especially when you're indoors and you don't have a lot of space. We've all heard of ICM, intentional camera movement. It's something that a lot of landscape photographers use, particularly when a scene's not very exciting. So a flat beach, for example, looks okay in a regular photograph, but if you move that camera across following the horizon just a little, everything starts to be blurred and it's much more conceptual and abstract. And you might have seen people do this in forests as well, where you've got the forest floor and then the trees just streak straight up into the sky. Now that is all ICM. But did you know, with a wide-angle lens, you don't get straight lines. What happens is you get this curved line. It is amazing. those curved lines have limited use, but in the right situation, it has great effect. I'm going to show you what I think is a fantastic effect. I'm going to show you how to do it as a self-portrait, but you can also do it with moving objects like cyclists or buses. This is a really great technique to use in the urban landscape. First up, I'll show you my selfie technique. You do need lots of room. So basically, point the camera and spin. Not the most flattering of images, but you do get the point. Let's see if we can get one of these warped long exposure images on a vehicle. And remember, it works best at the widest possible angle. So for me, that's 15 millimeters. I love it. That old Land Rover is a perfect subject. This last tip ties into the in-camera movement idea, only this time the camera isn't moving, the scene is. This is used really effectively by landscape photographers when they're taking in a really big scene and the clouds are moving away from or towards them. So what happens is that if the clouds are moving away from you, they start on the outside of the scene, and by the time they get towards whatever the subject is, they're right in the middle again. Now, if you couple this with a long exposure, you get what I call streakers. But did you know you can use this in urban and street photography as well? So I might get myself into one of the tunnels and see if I can get a bicycle coming past. I could be waiting here a long time. It's Saturday morning, there's not a lot of foot traffic that happens when it's not peak hour. Well, that one clearly wasn't working, so now I've come out onto the street. I've got cars on this side and bikes on this side, and now we just wait. And that's that. Now back to the water fountain. We've covered quite a lot in just these 5 techniques. Distortion, perspective, ICM, context, and streakers. If you use any of these techniques, or if you've got something that wasn't covered here, please let me know in the comments below. And then check out these 5 techniques I use for shooting a waterfall. Ooh. Whoa, Jesus.